So the sermon title is An Authentic Faith. And I imagine that when you read it in the DU or the order of service, particular images come to your mind when you see that word faith. It gets misconstrued a lot. What images come to your mind? I wonder if you get something like this. A traditional image of a church service, this woman coming to offer a prayer, maybe in the hopes that something in her life will be different or better. Or maybe it's the leap of faith that you know so well. This is that idea we have in our culture that you're making a decision, a risky decision, without knowing what the results are going to be. Too often, I think the notion that comes to mind is this, though. The notion of blind faith. What James Luther Adams talked about in the reading, that notion that we believe something unreasonable to be true because someone else tells us to believe it to be true. But I think that it's easy for us to make a straw man out of some of these understandings of faith and to reject the notion of faith as either believing something is true or not. I think that if that's all we imagine it to be, we're not going to get a lot of use out of it in our daily lives, and we're selling ourselves short, doing ourselves a disservice. I want to show you an image that I think captures a crisis of faith in the exact moment that it's happening. This is an image from the floor of the stock exchange during one of the worst plunges in the market in 2008. Pay attention to the faces of these guys here. One has his hand over his mouth in disbelief. They're staring up at numbers that they didn't expect. This man in the middle I'm particularly interested in because I think what I see in his face is a crisis of faith. If I'm trying to get inside his mind, I'm sensing fear. I see a person who's thinking, what I believed was dependable is not dependable. What I trusted is not behaving in a trustworthy fashion. Something I have put my time, my money, my loyalty into is not paying its return. Here's another leap of faith. Do you recognize this image? This is Felix Baumgartner. A week ago today, he jumped out of a helium balloon at 120,000 feet above the Earth in the stratosphere at the edges of space with only that suit and a parachute. I guarantee you Felix thought about what realities were worthy of his confidence before he jumped out of this balloon. Do I trust the science and the laws of physics that my team is using? Are these reliable indicators of something that's trustworthy? Do I trust the people on my team? Do I trust that where they're living for is more than fame or efficiency? Do I trust that they are living for my safety? Who is worthy of my trust? What is worthy of my confidence? See, I don't think that we have to come to such extremes to see that we make faith claims, whether we call them that or not, all the time. You go to a doctor's office because you don't know how to heal yourself. And so you put your money and your time and your faith in someone who might. Or faith sometimes looks like engaging in an act of service, knowing what my life is worthy of living for, what causes of equality or justice are worth sacrificing for, like this next one. What is worthy of my time? What's worthy of me giving up my privilege? What's worthy of living for? That's a faith question. Sometimes we ask, what is worthy even of the cost of my life? Like the people who would engage in acts of civil disobedience and justice. I think sometimes we don't call them acts of faith, maybe because we've got challenges with the language, or maybe just because we're on autopilot and we don't realize that we're doing it. But just think about what kids in school do every single morning. They make an explicit claim about what deserves their allegiance. I think there are faith claims all around us that we make and engage in, whether we call them that are happening all the time. So I love what James Luther Adams said about this morning in the reading. He said, the question about faith isn't, will I be a person of faith? That's kind of easy to reject based on what you think a person of faith looks like. He said, the question is, which faith is mine? Or even better, which faith should be mine? See, he said, call it what you want. Everybody puts their ultimate trust in something. We're living for God. We're living for science. We're living for country or money or success. And that we can tell which things we're putting our trust in by the way we live. So for us in this church, one of the primary ways we understand faith, when you hear that word, is not either believing something is true or not, or believing something is true because somebody else told you to. It's much richer and much more subtle than that. It's about knowing what is worthy of the confidence and trust of your brief life. What is worthy of the confidence, trust, and service of your brief life? Now, Adams said that we're always in a multi-faith context. By that, he means there's no moment, there's no time, there's no space in which there aren't many things asking for our allegiance. Some of them competing, some of them all good at the same time, but they're all asking for our attention at the same time. You probably have felt this in your life. The early Christian writings and the authors of those knew this as well. We're not the first people to come up with that. One of the writers has the teacher Jesus say, you can't serve two masters at the same time. You'll either love one or hate the other. He says you can't serve God and money both. Or if you prefer Bob Dylan, you're going to have to serve somebody. But see, I don't think we make claims about faith for the most part in our lives, if you're not a minister or a seminarian, sitting around making abstract claims about God or human nature. I think it's practical, everyday decisions. I hear people living in this church with these kind of tensions. My family and my job are both asking for my attention. Justice and money are both asking for my attention. How much loyalty am I willing to give to my country or denomination? I've heard people in the church say, I value justice, but my family needs my attention. How much time and money am I supposed to give to either of these? I work at a job that pays the bills, but I'm not sure I think the company I work for is ethical. I'm not sure I buy into the worship of the beautiful and skinny, but I also don't sometimes believe I will be loved in this body. I hear these tensions of where we place worth all the time. And when you hear that word worship here, know that it comes from an old English word, worthshippe, to give worth to. It's not about human beings groveling in their unworthiness before a worthy God. It's about human beings gathering to give worth to things that deserve worth. Worthship. So when you reflect on these issues of faith, and I mean faith in your life, I don't think that it's preparation for some catechism or confirmation or exam. I think it's preparation for the choices that you are going to be asked to make. Your children and your workplace and your friends and the television are all going to ask you to choose. And in this church, in a free church, an authentic faith is one that you do choose. See, I can stand up here all day and night and tell you that love and justice are worthy objects of your devotion and service, but my guess is that you're not going to believe me until you've made a choice based on how you have experienced love and justice. My guess is that you're going to experience and make a decision about where money is valued in your life by your experience of having it or not. That you know whether your body is trustworthy as an ultimate source of good based on being sick or healthy. My guess is that you're going to make a choice about which understanding of God or country deserves your service based on whether or not that God or country will hold you in its embrace. I wonder if you've had a before and after moment that helped you make this decision. Something happens, and afterward you can never understand what's worthy of your trust in the same way. Kind of like the picture of those guys we saw with their faces when the market that they had believed in was not acting in a dependable way. I know I can look back in my biography and point out before and after moments. When I was growing up in the church that I was raised in, or the church I attended as a younger man, I remember that I had faith in a very particular understanding of God. In fact, my trust was that this notion of God would protect me from harm and evil. And then I had a before and after moment. Someone that I loved deeply was killed in an act of violence, and I can tell you no picture on the wall would have ever been evidence of the crisis of faith that I entered into. Kind of in a reactive way, I did reject the ideas of God and religion and church in their entirety for some time. But on my own, I had to reevaluate which notion of God, which notion of church can I feel honest and authentic about offering my devotion and service and time and love and money to. So for me, an authentic faith is not just knowing what's worthy of your concern. It's knowing that it's been tested by your experience, that you could name that experience. And the advanced practice, unfortunately, means knowing that not everybody else's experience is the same as yours. The even more advanced practice means knowing that if you learned whether family was dependable by how you were treated by family, someone else is making the same decision by how they're being treated by you. Somebody else is watching you to see how dependable you believe country, money, God, church, power, success to be. If your understanding of faith is based on your experience, then you are a teacher to others. The reality, I think, though, is that so many of us are simply on autopilot. That we don't really know what we trust or why we act the way we do. And a lot of this is probably just sheer habit and momentum, but I think also, to be honest, we don't want to pull up that rug and find out what's under there. What we're spending our time, our money, our attention, and devotion on. This is a challenging task. This is not blind faith at all. Adam said the unexamined faith is not worth living. In the reading from James Luther Adams this morning, he said, sure, we might stand up and repeat an affirmation or a creed week after week and then just give our deepest loyalty to something else entirely. And I really want to believe he's talking about somebody else. Surely not our church. Surely not me. He says, find out what that deepest loyalty is, and you have found a person's real religion. Find that out, and you have found their God. I do have a list of things that I believe are worthy of my faith and trust and service. In years of this work, I do have a list of those things I believe are dependable sources of human good. And I'm guessing that if you've been around here for a while, you could probably guess some of the things that my list looks like. But in an authentic faith and a free church, nobody's going to make that choice for you. I cannot make that choice for you. This church cannot make that choice for you. Even if you decide to delegate that choice to somebody else, you've made a choice. And it wouldn't be as powerful if we could tell you what was worthy of your trust. But I can give you some advice about how to figure out and discern where you're putting your attention. What are you treating like gods in your life? First, like Adam said, think about what gets you excited. What is it that animates you and gets you moving, or maybe gets you angry? Like Daniel often says from the pulpit, what is it that breaks your heart? Could you name those things? Also, ask yourself, what is it that if we preached against it from the pulpit, you would leave here? If you heard us preach against something enough times from this pulpit, what would make you leave the church? If you heard someone preaching against it in a bar or a presidential debate, what would you rush to defend? What would you defend religiously? We talked a little bit about the fact that sometimes we have many things asking for our devotion, all of which are good. Family, justice, church, country, that a lot of good things are asking for our attention at the same time, but we just have limited hours in the day. One church member a couple of years ago described this exercise to me as, who am I going to disappoint today? And I think that's a very real feeling that we have, that there's just not enough money, just not enough time, just not enough passion, so we have to choose. When you're trying to make a decision about what is weighted more so than others, ask yourself a simple question: how much of this is enough? If you want to know what your devotion to money is, have a conversation with your family about what you think your maximum wage should be. How much do we make before we give the rest away? Ask yourself, how much is enough? How much family is enough for you? How much justice is enough for you? How much community is enough for you? How much work is enough for you? No one else but you knows the answer. And of course, if you want a practical tool that you could do today by yourself, you could print out a copy of your calendar or your most recent bank statement and put them next to each other. Because I know that when I do, it is a very honest indication of where I am spending limited resources. Because I can't come up with more money, and I'm not going to get more time. Sometimes when we reflect on these things, our ultimate concerns rise to the top. But see, I think that when we talk about faith, it's more than just knowing, and it's more than just choosing. I think an authentic faith is one where you contribute to the things that you say are worthy of love. Does that make sense? You think that church is a dependable source of human good? It didn't get that way unless somebody showed up. If equity and justice are dependable sources of human good and attention, then somebody has to show up and make justice real. There's no such things as poetry without poems or justice without just institutions, right? And I think that's what Marge Piercy is talking about in her poem this morning. That's got to be my favorite, or maybe one of the top 3 favorite poems. See, she says, I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the field to harvest in a row and pass the bags along, who haul in the line in their places, who are not parlor generals or field deserters, but who move in the common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands and crumbles to dust. She says the pitcher cries out for water to carry and a person for work that is real. I think she's talking about our theme here. The notion that if we say things are dependable, we have to make sure they stay dependable. Our theme year here in church of a year of engagement is people who believe in the neighborhood track that human relationships are worthy sources of human good, and so they're working hard to meet the people who live across the street from them. Our community track is full of people who have decided that it's a worthwhile effort to make sure everyone in our city doesn't go hungry. And so they are getting their hands in the dirt, common as mud, working to make sure that they grow food and feed others. People in our global track have decided that there's something more valuable to our humanity than any religious label or denominational label or nation's label. And so they're meeting face to face with people from all over the globe, trying to learn in humility. And if you don't have a project in this theme year, I would encourage you to get involved. One of the things this church can do and promise with integrity is that we will ask you over and over and over again to stop and consider what is worthy of the trust and service of my brief life. And do my actions reflect those sources of goodness? There's something really beautiful and powerful here. You see, you do have to choose, but you get to choose. You get to choose what is worthy of your life's attention and focus. You get to choose whether or not you will make things that you think are dependable more dependable. And I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who are not parlor generals or field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. There's so much goodness in this room. And there is so much power in this community. And I hope that this place and these people help you over time determine how you will use yours in the service of your brief and precious life. What better time than now? Amen.